This is Brian Kelly, CEO of the amazing Prison Entrepreneurship Program. We are here for another edition of PEPTalks, where we talk with the people and about the issues that are affecting us as a community. Here we are in July 2020. COVID has roared back with a vengeance. People are getting infected in record numbers, getting sick, even dying. We are putting on masks. We're socially distancing ourselves. There's just a fracture in the community, and that fracture goes much deeper. It goes along racial lines, socioeconomic lines. It seems like we are more distanced from each other than ever. Those are along the lines of race, creed, gender, age. It's a tough time. But I would also say that that's kind of the sweet spot that PEP is in. There's so much polarizing stuff going on right now, but I would tell you there's a unifying thing, and one of which that brings us together is something that unifies both Trump and Biden. Do you know what that is? It's criminal justice reform. Both sides of the aisle agree that is desperately needed, that we need to rethink how we're doing criminal justice in this country and justice as a whole. And so, that's the sweet spot that we've operated in a long time. It's not just criminal justice reform, but also interracial unity and economic empowerment, economic freedom. PEP is all about transforming lives, restoring families, and rebuilding communities, and it's right in that spot that we want to talk about today. And I've brought in a wonderful example of all those things. A Class 23 graduate from the Cleveland facility. Would you introduce yourself today?
Hello, y'all. My name is Rodney Barfield, also known as Wendy Williams. How you doing?
Of course, you guys know that all the guys in PEP get a sweet name from their class, a way to kind of break down the old guy and start to rebuild the new, and that's a great one. Rodney, how long have you been out?
I've been out over 9 months now.
9 months. Wow. How long were you in?
17 and a half years.
Whew. Brother, you're in that same category as me. 17 and a half years. That's pretty substantial. Do you mind sharing with us why you ran?
I was convicted of the charge conspiracy to commit capital murder.
Wow. That's pretty heavy. Do you mind if we go back and take a look and just kind of what led up to that? Would you share with us what the early years of Rodney looked like?
As growing up, I grew up with both my parents in the house. I was actually on the honor roll. I was in Boy Scouts. As I said before, I actually had a Commodore 64 computer in the late 80s. The only thing is, though, is that as an only child, I really didn't have anybody to show me how to work it, so I just really just had to play games. Growing up, as a child, my father was there for me. We played a lot, but as I got older, he just was non-existent. Kind of like we spoke about in Authentic Manhood, the absent father wound.
The absent father wound?
Yes.
Wow.
And specifically, one time I remember being in middle school. I got caught drinking at the age of 12 in middle school. The principal called my dad to the school, and he actually said nothing to me about it. He didn't speak to my mom, didn't reprimand me, didn't say, why'd you do it? He just left it alone. So from then on, I kind of felt like it was all right to do that. And growing up, I started separating myself from my core group of friends that were doing the right things. And I started trying to hang with the cool guys, and that's when I started smoking and drinking and getting into more trouble, dropping out of high school and everything. So
I see how that plays out, and we've seen that a lot in our guys. So kind of lead me up to conspiracy to commit capital murder. How's that happen?
Well, really after years of just living irresponsibly, just smoking and drinking and just kind of living for the day, job from job, check to check, still living with my mom. I actually went to ITT Tech at one point in time and being on my own in Austin and partying, I dropped out of ITT Tech. And some guys that I knew actually asked me to be the driver in the murder. for insurance money for money. And at first I said no.
So they offered this to you. Was there a price associated with this when they offered you opportunity?
Yes, unfortunately I put the amount of $50,000 on somebody's life.
Wow. $50,000, and you were what, 18, 19?
At the time I was 19 going on 20.
Offered $50,000 to drive a car, take in their insurance money to commit a murder. And you turned it down.
It was a murder for hire for insurance money, and initially I did turn it down.
Okay.
But about a week or so later, they came back and asked me again, and this time I said yes.
Okay, so you followed through with it. How soon were you arrested?
The actual offense happened in '98. I was not arrested until 2002.
That's quite a while. What was the trial like and everything? Did you go through trial? Did you plea bargain? What did that look like?
My lawyer told me the best thing for me to do was to take a plea bargain, and they gave me a cap of 30 years, and they actually sentenced me to 25 years in TDCJ.
Okay. So you go to TDCJ, went through processing. What unit did you land on when you were in the system?
Once I went through the Gurney unit for diagnostics, I actually landed on the Gibb Lewis unit. I did 8 years on the Gibb Lewis unit, and that was kind of a traumatic experience, to say the least. I'm not from the hood. I placed myself in that environment, but going to prison actually allowed me to see a different side of life.
Dive down into that a little bit. What was the culture like that you encountered inside of prison? How would you sum that up?
Cutthroat. Each man for his own. If you do have friends, it's a really close circle, and even that circle right there is suspect at times. I wasn't an angel. I wasn't the exact model inmate, and on paper I was, but actually I sold everything from sandwiches to weed, cigarettes, made hooch.
Hooch is homemade alcohol that you can make with sugar, fruit, and yeast on the inside, and it's hotly sought after. So I want to dive into this. So you had that entrepreneurial spirit already. I mean, you're getting your hands on resources that some people don't have, and you're selling them. You're making some money inside of prisons. So.
Yes, making money. When we say money, we're talking about commissary. We're talking about food. We're not talking about actually cash. Until you start selling the weed and cigarettes.
All right. So. Let's see, how did you get introduced to PEP then?
So in 2009, a friend of mine had a card, and by that time I had already thought about different businesses that I would like to open up. And when he received that card, he just looked at it and threw it away.
He got a PEP card, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I couldn't understand why you would not take advantage of the opportunity. So it wasn't until 2012 when I was transferred to the Essence unit that I actually had another encounter with PEP. I was working for the warden over there, Warden Rhetoric, and my coworker received a card. And once again, he didn't want to take advantage of it. So because of that, the warden looked at me and said, "Do you want to be in PEP?" And I said, "Yes." He literally reached behind him onto the bulletin board and grabbed Marcus Hill's card and called him to try to get me inside PEP.
Warden Rhetoric found out you wanted to be in PEP, and the warden stopped and made a call for you. And at that point, we hadn't even started PEP on the Essex unit, have we?
No.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Warden Rhetoric has always been a great friend to PEP. That's awesome to hear. So he made the call to Marcus. Did you get to meet with Marcus?
Actually, I did. Marcus was doing an interview a couple weeks later, and I was able to attend the interview. But he told me due to me having so much time, 13 and a half years left, that I was unable to attend PEP because they looked for somebody to be within 3 years of the discharge date.
Mm-hmm.
And I just asked him if I could just go over the test, and he allowed me to do it. And because of receiving Inc. magazine and the Wall Street Journal and different periodicals, I knew about the business side of it. I knew about Catherine Vore. And so when I told him that I'll be able to pass the test with no problem without even studying the study packet, he said, "Okay, that's fine." He said, "But what about your character?"
What'd you say to that?
I said, "I'm good." I'm like, I'm good with my character. He said, "You are?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Okay."
So you had, too much time to get in PEP. How did you actually get in then?
Okay. So a few months later, Pat McGee, V-Tran, and some other PEP staff started coming to the Essex unit to prep the room for PEP. And when I found out about this, I was ecstatic. I couldn't believe it. So every chance I got, I was able to go to the PEP room and help them out, whether it was bringing in chairs, bringing them supplies, whatever they needed. I was falling out of place, speaking to the peer educators, speaking to the participants that came to start phase 1 on the Essex unit. And eventually, with the peer educators, the participants, Warden Wittoric's word, officers, and other individuals that spoke on my behalf, they allowed me to be inside PEP.
All right, that's fantastic. So you were somewhat of an exception. Didn't Pat had a phrase that he used about you, right? Being able to get in.
Yes, when we went to the Cleveland unit, Pat actually said that I bogarted PEP.
You kind of shouldered your way in.
I kicked the way into PEP.
So we had just started the program on the Estes unit. At that time, we were only doing Leadership Academy, and so you went through Leadership Academy there. Did you learn anything during that time? Did anything kind of rise up about your character?
Yes, exactly. So what Marcus said came back fivefold instantly, and I started thinking about I said I was all right, but actually I really wasn't. I had a lot of flaws, and I still have flaws that I need to work on. But it was brought to light through phase 1, and it continued through phase 2, and actually even more so being the servant leader, being in leadership positions.
Okay, so you went to Leadership Academy while you're at Estes, but we weren't doing the full program then, and you got transferred over to the Cleveland facility to go through the business plan portion, so you got to be a little bit on both.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about BPC. How did that go?
Actually, I loved it. At first, I thought it was going to be very difficult, and it really wasn't. You would think that if you had to give a business speech or a business plan competition speech, 7.5 minutes to 10 minutes, but it's not as difficult as you think it is. I met some very nice volunteers during that time period. Danielle, her husband David, Nancy and Tim, Cameron, Dougal. Yes, I enjoyed it very much.
You mentioned somebody earlier. What about Jay Wall? Was he an impact in your life?
Very much so. Jay Wall, I love him because there was a lot of times where I was struggling during my time as a peer educator, and Jay Wall gave me some very encouraging words.
Fantastic. It's amazing that some of you that have impacted Rodney, and so we thank you for that. Talk to me about the business design competition, but really graduation. Did your family come? What was that like?
That was amazing. Since I've never graduated from high school, I had to get my GED. My mom never saw me walk across the stage in the cap and gown, and that was one of the most important times of my life. That should see her watch me walk across the stage with the cap and gown. My brother, that I only found out about when I was 12 years old, he came to graduation, and Mr. and Mrs. LaWise are family friends since '83. I love them to death, yes.
I want to dive down into family a little bit because not too long after graduation, you lost your mom, right?
Yes.
We talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, that was very difficult. I was actually at work, and Al Massey came to me and told me that they want me inside the chaplain's office, and I told him it was count time, and he was like, "They know they're gonna let you go." And so once I got there, Mrs. LaWise was on the phone, and she was actually telling me that my mom was very sick and that she wanted to know my clothes size. And when she told me that, I just started breaking down crying. I just couldn't hold back. It was very, very difficult for me. And even right now, I haven't really just come to grips with it. Just to think that for the last 15-plus years of my mom's life, she had to come see me in prison.
Will you talk a little bit about dealing with grief on the inside when you don't have family to lean on, you can't go to the funeral, and how hard is that?
That was very difficult. I'm kind of reserved, and so I really don't speak to a lot of people, and sometimes it's difficult to speak to people because a lot of people really just do not generally know how to listen. And so dealing with that inside prison, that's everybody's worst nightmare. If you have your mom when you go to prison, the worst thing that could happen to you is losing your mom while you're in prison. And I remember there were times where I would walk down the hallway and just literally just start crying. And this one time I actually just walked inside the law library and walked straight to the back and sat down and cried. And the woman that was working, the officer that was working, she did not say one word to me at all because she knew that this was out of my character. And she allowed me to sit there and compose myself and walk out without a problem.
You know, a man's world is never the same after he loses his mom, and I've walked through that with many. Let's talk about parole for a little bit. So you finally did make parole. How many times did you come up for parole?
Ooh, wow. We have about the same number, right?
We do.
About 13 times.
13 times. We share that same number. So, you know, what was holding you back? How come you weren't making parole all that time?
One, my offense. There's no way I could get around that. My victim's family, they were protesting my parole, and I have no hard feelings towards them for that. I understand completely. I accept responsibility for it. I would probably do the same thing if I was in their shoes. So year after year, I was denied parole for the same reason.
But something very crucial happened. What was it?
Wow, this actually brings tears to my eyes right now. So they call mail, and I'm in the day room, and I get this letter. There's no name, but it's a return address. And of course, I don't recognize the address. And as soon as I open the letter up, I see my victim's father's name at the top of the page on the letterhead. And I freeze in the day room. And when I start reading the letter, I just can't believe that he actually wrote me. Basically, what it comes down to in the letter is that he told me about the pain and the grief that I caused him and his family. And he said three things. He said I could either continue to protest your parole, I could do nothing, or I could support your parole. And right there, I just melted in the day room.
Wow. So there was some accountability that your victim's family was calling you to the square. Was there anything he asked you specifically to do?
His first question, he asked me 6 questions, but his first question specifically was, initially, you said no to being the driver in this murder. He said, you changed your mind. Why? And it was very difficult for me to write to this to him, and I actually told him that I apologize for putting a price of $50,000 on your son's life.
Wow, so you just own that with him.
I mean, there's no other way to do it.
So I commend you on that. It takes a lot of courage and it takes ownership, and that's something that we talk about in PP all the time, is just really owning our past and growing from that. And I've seen that in you. What was his response?
So I actually sent him basically a packet. I actually sent him a cover letter with a table of contents in it, my letter to him and his family, letters of reference from friends, an article about PEP, and even a 10-minute speech that I had given at the Hodge unit. I typed it up and gave it to him. And at the end of the letter, I asked him for a response. I would love to hear from him. Well, of course, I never heard from him directly, but 2 weeks later, I was granted parole.
So obviously he withdrew the protest that he'd been pushing against your release. That's amazing. Let's talk about release for a little bit.
Okay.
Right? So you got out. Who came and picked you up?
Pat McGee.
Pat McGee. Wow, not everybody gets Pat McGee. That's
right.
Pretty cool.
Coincidentally, Pat said there was a lot of parallels because he actually got out after doing 17 and a half years on October 3rd, just like I did.
Now, you told me you were very specific on what you wanted to have for your first meal when you got out. What was that?
Oh, yeah. Actually, somebody asked me that. I had wrote them a letter probably in 2011 or 12, and they asked me, did you actually go to Pizza Hut and get that thin crust pizza? I sure did.
That's awesome. Hey, so you come out, you stay at our Caleb house in Houston.
Yeah.
And what was release like, first few weeks out?
Ooh, so it was a reality hit. It was social shock, everything that they talk about. I had all these dreams and goals and ambitions, and then next thing you know, like, I don't even have my ID. I was born in New Mexico, so it took me 3+ weeks to actually get my ID. From that time, I was just taking the bus, trying to find jobs, walking in the rain, walking in the cold. I actually had pictures of me eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches at the bus stop.
And you were on a monitor too, right?
That was difficult. Being on the monitor, having a curfew of 5 o'clock while trying to find a job, is just, and you're riding a bus, it's new to you, like the GPS keeps on turning around and around. I don't know where I'm going. So one time in particular, I was at the bus stop. I missed my bus, and my friend Jonathan Shillings calls me. He was
out of the clear blue sky?
Yeah, just out of the clear. He was listening to 979 The Box and heard a song, reminded me of him, and he was like, "Hey man, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Man, I'm downtown at the bus stop. I missed my bus, man. Like my curfew's coming. Like I don't know what to do." He was like, "Where are you at?" And I pinged my location to him. And I'm not exaggerating. 10 minutes later, Jonathan comes around the corner in his F-450 with 3 vans in tow, picks me up, and takes me back to the house.
So Jonathan's job is to transport vehicles, and he shows up downtown
to transport me to the house.
Wow,
yeah.
That's great timing. Tell me about other people, whether it's staff, PEP staff, or volunteers, or your PEP brothers, who have been instrumental in your, reacclimation into society.
Harvey. I have to speak up on Harvey because Harvey knows my goals. We spoke a lot during events inside the prison, and one thing that he did is he asked me for my resume, and he submitted to a company called Equipco. So I had an interview and did my best during the interview. And I was actually hired. So I got to thank Harvey for that.
And who's your boss at Equipco?
Somebody that everybody knows. His name is Daniel Cahill.
Daniel Cahill. And was he the guy that interviewed you for that job?
Yes.
What was that interview like?
It was actually a great interview. Daniel's very intelligent, very smart, great leader, great boss, great mentor. And during the interview, he asked me, he was like, "So tell me some of your goals, some of your short-term goals." And I told him, I said, really, my main goal right now is to be able to see my daughter graduate in June. And so he started saying, he says, "So exactly what do you need?" He said, "You need employment." I said, "Yes." He said, "You need money from the employment, from the employer." And I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "You need a time off." Yes. He said, "What else do you need?" I said, "Well, actually, I just need the approval from parole." He said, "Well, of course, if you do everything you're supposed to, that shouldn't be a problem." And I said, "Yes."
So we haven't really developed that. You had a daughter right before you got incarcerated, then you did 17.5 years. Any contact with her during that time?
Yes, well, actually, I have 2 daughters. I have a daughter that was born in '96, and shortly after she was born, she moved to New York with her mom. And I have a daughter that was born actually 12 days before I was incarcerated.
Wow.
So I've had a very limited interaction with both of them. Throughout my 17 years, I actually wrote a lot to my daughter Amari. Kiana, she started writing me when she was about 16 years old, and we're developing that relationship right now.
Mm-hmm. So was it your youngest daughter that was about to graduate? She's where, on the East Coast?
Yeah, she's in Virginia, yes.
Wow, okay. And you wanted to go to graduation. Did you do that?
That was amazing. I actually surprised her with a touchscreen laptop, and as she was reading my card, I walked down the stairs and surprised her. Never seen her before in life, ever.
What she did? How'd she react?
She screamed as loud as she could because that same night she was in the emergency room with kidney stones, so she was kind of doped up on the morphine drip that they gave her.
Okay.
So she screamed as loud as she could when she saw me.
Wow. How many days did you spend with her up there?
A whole week, from June the 11th to June 18th.
I've seen the pictures of you. You're in a reclining chair, and she's curled up as an 18-year-old child, right, in your lap, and you guys are both asleep. That is just touching.
So let me tell you about that picture.
Okay.
Actually, I wasn't asleep.
All right, yeah.
So I had woke up, and she was still asleep, and I saw somebody walking by, and I said, "Take the picture real quick." And so when they took the picture, I went back to sleep.
Wow, that's fantastic. So you have rekindled that relationship with her?
Yes, I have a really good relationship with her. We talk all the time on the phone. My oldest daughter, Kiana, we talk probably about once a week.
Okay. That's awesome, and I love the way you rekindled that, and I love the way you snuck up there and surprised her like that. What are your goals? What do you want to do? What's it look like for Rodney in a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Really, right now, my goal is to become my own owner-operator for hot shops.
Do you have your CDL?
I'm studying for it right now. I just actually applied for my TWIC and was denied, so I fill out a waiver for that. I'm studying for my CDL. As soon as I finish studying for it, I will take my DOT physical, and I will take the permit test, the written test for the permit.
Awesome. I think you'll be a great owner-operator. You've demonstrated character and just ability to do all that. I love that. Let me ask one last question before we open it up to Q&A. What would you say is the special sauce of PEP? What's impacting guys like you and those around us?
I would have to say is that, for one, the network, but at the same time, the tools. You provide everything that you need to succeed from day one. From the moment that you come into PEP through Phase 1, Leadership Academy, you give everybody the same opportunity to learn, to grow, to become leaders, accountability partners, and mentors.
Wow. And I see you becoming all of those, and already are many of those.